Hello, I'm Cheryl and welcome to my sewing room. In this video, I'm going to discuss your finished block size for the beginner's sampler quilt. I'm sure you're finding out that not all of your blocks are coming out quite the same size. Remember, I told you that the finished block size was 12.5 for all the blocks, but I know in the real world of quilting, it doesn't always come out like that. So I'm going to address some of those issues on how you can fix those blocks without having to remake all of them. I don't want you to do that. So let's first talk about what could have gone wrong. Okay, maybe in the very beginning the fabric wasn't cut correctly. It might have been just a little off. All it takes is one piece of fabric cut incorrectly to throw the entire quilt off. So you need to always recheck the pieces you cut just to verify that they are the right size. Then maybe you didn't use the seam allowance. Maybe you didn't use a 1/4 inch throughout the entire quilt. Maybe one of the seams was that 1/4 inch, but another one might have been slightly bigger, the next one a little bit smaller, and so forth. That will throw the whole block off. So you need to be consistent and make all your seams the same size. Maybe the tension on your sewing machine was a little tight. If you've noticed your fabric is puckering a little bit, you might need to loosen up the tension slightly. So you look in your user's manual for instructions on how to adjust your tension. Also, maybe you didn't press all the time, or you overpressed, you stretched it out. That can throw your block off too. Pressing is a very key part of making a quilt. Or maybe you just didn't have the right tools, and I'm going to give you an example of what I did when I first started quilting. My cutting table was on the inside of a linen closet. It was one of those little ironing boards that hung from the back of the door. So I would lay that little ironing board down. I'm kind of embarrassed to even tell this story. I had a tiny little cutting mat on it. My cutting ruler was a carpenter's ruler, not a quilt ruler. And my rotary cutter was an old blade, and I'm trying to cut my fabric correctly on this ironing board that wasn't a solid flat surface. It took me 1.5 years to make that quilt. That's because I was working and I didn't always have a lot of time. And once I got it finished, I put it on the bed. I didn't really like it. I kept it on the bed overnight, and when I got up the next morning, I took that quilt off the bed and took it down to the local thrift shop. I hated it so much. So, use the right tools. They will make your quilt a lot more successful. All right, so let's look at your blocks. What you want to do is take all of your blocks, all right? Don't trim anything off of them yet. Just take one of your blocks, any one of them. Lay your square ruler down. If you want your blocks to come out well, you need a square ruler. This is a 12.5 inch square ruler. You will use it so much. I highly recommend you get it. All you want to do right now, you're not going to cut anything off, nothing. You're just measuring. See if the quilt comes out equally on all edges, all right? If it doesn't, then it's off. Okay, it's off, but you're not going to do anything with it just yet. Write down on a little piece of paper and stick it on your block what size it came out at. Maybe this one came out 12 3/8, not 12.5. That's fine. Just leave it. Set it aside. Take your next block. Do the same thing. Measure it. Check it all out. Write down the size, put a little note on it. If it came out the same size as the first block, so far you're on a lucky streak. Set it in that pile. If it didn't, start a new pile. And keep going on down all your blocks, measuring them, okay? So now your problem is that you need to now determine what your finished size is going to be. It may not be 12.5. Maybe the majority of your blocks fell into one pile, then that's your finished size. No matter what it is, that's your finished size. So your job now is to take the other piles and make them what the majority is. Now, hopefully, you've only got one or two little lone wolves out there that you need to fix. Probably not. Okay, but let's address the blocks that are too large. Okay, so I'm going to take up this block here. Let's look at this one. Okay, so let's pretend this block came out 1/4 of an inch bigger than all your other blocks. If you cut this block down, this is the seam allowance area right here between the end of this point and the raw edge. That's where your seam is going to be, right in here. So if you cut any of this off, your seam is going to come into this point. So you will lose your points on the block. Now, here's where the decision comes in. If you're going to use just to lose a little bit of the point, I wouldn't worry about it. I would go ahead and cut it down and put it into your quilt. But if you're losing a lot, I recommend you figure out where you went wrong. You might be able to take the block apart and save it and maybe just remake certain sections of it, or you may have to just rebuild the whole thing, okay? But that's going to be your decision. Do I cut it down or do I rebuild it? So determine if your points are important to you. It isn't to everybody. So try to figure out what you want to do. All right, now let's address those blocks that really came out bad. Too small, crooked, a nightmare block. This is mine. When you're looking at it from a distance, it looks fine. But when you go to measure it, it's really off. So what you want to do when you have a block that came out too small, first try to figure out what part is off. Maybe there's only one little piece that's off, and you might be able to save this block. So put your ruler back down on it, all right? And line it up. Now, this section here ideally should have come out to 3 1/4 inches, as well as this row here. This row and this row should have been 3 1/4, and this 6 1/4, okay? So line it up and see if those sections came out correctly. Well, this one back here did, but this one here didn't. All right, so now you need to look at this whole section and figure out where it went wrong. This in here is correct. This is the right size. These two are off, especially this one. I recommend you go ahead and take this row off and fix the two corners, okay? Make them the correct size. They were probably just cut wrong. I think I was asleep when I made this block. Now let's suppose this block was off just a little bit all around. So what I'm going to do now is help you to increase this block size without having to rip it apart. And you're going to fix it through the way you place your sashing on. Now, you remember that pile, your majority pile? We're going to pretend that all of those in that pile that had the most blocks in it are 12 3/8. Let's say they all came out 12 3/8. So your sashing strips are going to be cut 2 1/2 inches wide by the length of your majority pile, which was 12 3/8. So this is 12 3/8 here. Now let's pretend this block is 12 1/4. So you're going to place, I'm going to turn this a little bit. You're going to place your sashing down on there. And you're going to make sure you have equal amounts of sashing hanging out on each end. Don't pull it all to where it's all overhanging on one end. You want to center your block on your sashing. Then push this sashing out. Now, if all you need to do is increase this block by 1/4 of an inch, you just need to move it out slightly, just a little bit to the center, and then smooth it out. Okay? And when you turn it over, I'm going to try to get this turned over, you're going to find that your sashing may be just hanging past the raw edge here just a little bit. What it's doing is it's straightening this edge out. So then you would go ahead and pin it down. Now, your 1/4 inch is going to be measured from the edge of the sashing. So you're going to come in 1/4 inch and stitch it on all the way across. I'm going to go to another example here. Here is one where I've already put the sashing on both sides of the block. Okay, I had to make this one a little bit bigger and straighten out the edges. So I'm going to turn it over. Now on this one, the size came out correctly on this end, but this end was off. It came in a little bit. So you'll see that my sashing is sticking out a little bit past here, but not here. And there's a little bit on the edges at each end. So you're going to measure from the edge of the sashing and go all the way across. Okay? Now, you'll do that on both sides of your block. I'm not going to go through the entire pressing process in this video. I will address it in the next one. But you'll be pressing your sashing. Now when you go to attach your next block, now this block might be off also, or it might be the correct size. So you're going to center this block on the sashing. All right? So center it on there. The edges, maybe it's off a little bit. The sashing might be sticking out a little. That's fine. You're increasing the block size slightly. Then go ahead, measuring your 1/4 inch from that raw edge, stitch all the way across. Okay. Now, let's say you've got all of your blocks attached now. And in this quilt, there's going to be 3 blocks in a row. So let's say they're all attached. Now remember, this block is small. My sashing comes out on each end here. So when you go to cut your long strip of sashing, and I'm not going to go into the size of the long strip just yet. It will be addressed in the next video. You're going to lay that sashing down, and you're going to line it up on the edge of the sashing here and here. Okay? Lay it on there, smooth it out. Don't try to pull it back and line it up with this raw edge. Smooth it out so that it's lined up with the ends of the sashing in between the blocks. So that when you turn it over, you'll see that there's going to be a little bit of an overhang. That's fine. Then you're going to go ahead and stitch and measure from the raw edge of the sashing and stitch all the way across. Okay? So that's how you can increase some of your blocks a little bit. Okay? Well, I hope that that was helpful to you. I know I probably didn't address every problem you might have had. Please leave a comment in the comments section if you need any help with an issue that you're having with one or more of your blocks, and I will try real hard to answer it. Now, in the next video, we're going to put the sashing on the whole quilt, and let me get it here, and I'm going to show you what it's going to look like once it's got all of the sashing on it. Okay? So here we go. This is what it's going to look like. All right? Okay, so now to keep informed on all my future videos so that you get that information right away, subscribe. Click on either one of my subscribe buttons. There's one down there in the lower right hand corner throughout the entire video. It's red and it says subscribe. Click on that one at any time. Then towards the end of the video in the upper right hand corner is a little picture of me that will suddenly appear. That is also a subscribe button. Click on either one of those. Make sure you enter your email address. The next time I have a new video, YouTube sends you an email with a big button in the center. You click on that button and it takes you directly to my latest video. I'm Cheryl and I'm really glad you came to my sewing room. I'll see you next time and happy sewing.